Labour will ban transgender women from all women's shortlist after the Supreme Court's ruling on the definition of a woman. The party will vote on measures to scrap rules allowing its positive action schemes to be operated on the basis of self-identification. I mean, the idea that you could just... self-identification, man alive. This is Britain's equality regulator is expected to say lavatories, changing rooms and shelters should be run on the basis of biological sex. Meanwhile, new polling reveals 1 in 2 Labour voters also back the Supreme Court ruling. It's quite funny that 50% of Labour voters don't back the notion of what a biological woman is. Let's speak with Mo Lovett, producer of The Battle of Ideas. Mo, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
Just looking at this, I wanted to... When I first saw it, I thought, wow, the Labour Party have developed... the Labour government has developed some common sense here. It's a euphoric moment. They've seen the light. And then I thought, wow, this is probably a legal thing, isn't it? They're doing this because they don't want to be collared by the lawyers if they find themselves not adhering to a court ruling.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on, actually. I had a similar reaction to yourself, but when you dig deeper into it, it is purely because they have to follow the law.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court's decision in that for Women Scotland makes it clear that according to the Equality Act, the definition of a woman is defined by biology. So they now have to relook at their all-women shortlist to make sure they're all women biologically. And that's where, as you say, it's going to divide the Labour Party, as you've just said, about 50-50. And they're going to be in chaos, so much so, I think we hear leak today that they're considering, or they're going to rule on cancelling their all-women Labour conference in September, which happens just before the party conference in Liverpool. So they're now going to rule on whether or not to cancel that. So there'll be no women's conference because they had 2 choices. Either they couldn't accept trans women at the conference or they've cancelled it. So now no woman gets represented at all. So this kind of it backs up your point about it being a legal thing rather than a moral thing or a conviction thing on behalf of Labour.
I mean, what a bonkers world we found ourselves in, Mo. I mean, the fact that we even have to discuss this stuff and go through it is ridiculous. But I did think when you consider all of the... And there's a big spectrum of ridiculousness here. You know, a bloke who says, I'm a woman, therefore I should be able to use your changing room. I mean, that was always ridiculous, offensive, potentially dangerous, all of those things. I think the women's shortlist thing was almost one of the worst examples because, of course, the reason, if you look at the reasons, and understandable, the women's shortlists existed when there was a shortage, we couldn't get women in. The idea that some bloke who decides when he's 38 he's going to be a woman can share the same backdrop of iniquity or discrimination as a woman back in the day could have done is I mean, demonstrable nonsense, right? I mean, it seems unbelievable that a man who wears a dress would claim to have suffered over the years, which is what shortlists sort of are partly about, suffered over the years of being left out of their gender when they've spent most of their life as a bloke.
Well, we women haven't had very much of a window historically in terms of having our rights listened to, and misogyny looks like it's back on the table. Because obviously, if you are going to have subcategories of the term woman, which I don't think you can have subcategories, but if you are to have, then that's undermining the concept of woman. We never, ever hear this about trans men wanting to shoehorn themselves into men's sports and men's toilets and changing rooms and all the rest of it. There's very definitely a kind of misogynist kind of trend towards this. The other thing it is homophobic, because if you think that biological sex isn't real or it's interchangeable or that, you can just self-ID into whatever gender, then you don't, by definition, believe in same-sex attraction. So it's homophobic as well as misogynist. Now, that's not to say that we can't treat trans people with dignity and respect. And, many, many years ago, I ran a pub. We had a trans man and a trans woman frequently. I've got no idea which loo they used. I don't think any of the customers cared what loo they used, especially women's. You've got private cubicles. Who really cares? I think it's that vocal minority that have tried to erode other people's rights
100%.
Cause this problem. Intersex people, you have the LGBTQ activists now saying this is going to be detrimental to trans people and intersex people. Well, whose fault is that? It's their fault. They have made this a radical agenda. rather than seeing it as a matter of equality.
Indeed, and I've made the point a ton of times that this was, I've done this job for 20 odd years. This literally in the first 20 of those years, I can't remember a single time we ever debated this. It never came up. Even when Nadia won Big Brother back in the day, a trans woman, nobody even referenced. I mean, it was okay. She's a trans woman. That was it. Few headlines on it in the tabloids. It never got debated. Should Nadia use the women's lib? Nobody talked about this stuff, but these radical activists, who are often just straight blokes, have sort of almost hijacked it. They've invented this chronic term non-binary, which means literally nothing at all. It's not recognised anywhere medically or anywhere on the planet other than people who've chosen to self-identify as this. I saw a video yesterday. Mo, you'd have seen loads of these. It was an American thing. There's a bloke there in a T-shirt saying, I'm a woman. The interviewer is saying, why are you a woman then? What makes you a woman? And he's, I don't know. I'm just a woman because I want to identify as a woman. And then he said, well, what is a woman? And he said, feminine. Well, I mean, straight there, he was, frankly, caught in the net, if that was his only definition of a woman. Feminine. And he didn't make it a feeble attempt to even try and look like a woman, this fella. And it was extraordinary. And I thought, he can't, but what he's done there, he's a radical activist who's decided it's a bit cool and a bit different. It makes him a bit anti-establishment. It makes him stand out. It buys him some oppression points to just call himself a woman. I mean, these are the nut jobs that have been fueling this debate, not Nadia from Big Brother.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head there about this victim culture. It's almost like, heroes and success and positive things that we might have once valued people for. Now we are valued for how much of a victim we can be, and everybody's looking for a badge to wear to claim that they're oppressed. And it just makes a nonsense of the whole thing of, genuine oppression. Yeah. I mean, I'm not a particularly feminine woman, right? I'm quite feisty. I like politics and sport and things like that. But I'm no less a woman. And actually, that's the other thing with some of this argument. It starts to make it seem like, there are masculine interests and feminine interests. These were the old-fashioned sexist views that said women couldn't be in politics in the first place and they couldn't have a voice because they were too frail and they didn't understand the concept of justice because they were too emotional. These arguments are coming back into play, and women are unfortunately, at the forefront of some of this. So, but it's not going away, Ian. I mean, that Supreme Court ruling was fantastic news for Women Scotland, formidable women. I've got much respect for them all. But this isn't going away. There's going to be challenges and counter-challenges, and we'll see whether or not the NEC decides to cancel the Labour conference for women.
It's interesting. I was thinking the other day, I wonder whether the BBC will allow Little Britain to be shown again and the I'm a Lady sketch, because David Walliams, and Matt Lucas, without realising it, were way ahead of their time on that one, right?
Yeah, South Park's the other one, isn't it?
Yes, indeed.
These things that we used to be able to laugh at, and I mean, and laugh at ourselves as well, because I don't think it was necessarily cruel kind of laughter. Hinge and Bracket, if you're old enough to remember.
Yeah, Hinge and Bracket. I think even, if I remember rightly, somebody told me quite recently that Harry Hill, some of his stuff got censored because he often had bits where he would dress up as a woman and, chase another person around the studio or whatever. And I think ITV decided that when they re-show it, they've got to cut those bits out because you can't have a man dressing up as a woman. It's akin to blackface and all this stuff. And, everyone just lost their marbles on this.
Yeah, they really, really have. And I don't even think it's a case of things going too far. Like some people say, I think it's completely through the looking glass that people have forgotten what's important. And, men and women should be treated equally. And that means women deserve sex-based rights. That's what they fought for. But we live in censorious times, don't we? That whole patronising idea that something can be so offensive we can't hear it. Yeah. I mean, how do you write a book, or how do you kind of make a film now that shows the gritty reality of the world we live in, for fear of offending people? So it's affecting creative arts as well. It's unless you're on one side where you're able to, shout about Israel. That's there are certain rules to this thing that you have to be on one side.
That's very. And all of this would be fine, and just like a little kind of side dish point. if it wasn't for the fact that, you know, people have had their doors smashed down by the police for sort of crossing over a line because of a view they had, and particularly the issue we're discussing here, Mo, has been sort of central to that issue of free speech. You know, you called a man a man when you should have called him a woman, but it's a man.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's people who've been kind of repeatedly targeted by the police, and I think there was the case of the special constable last week in Kent Police, who had faced a knock on the door for his tweet. Well, he was actually arrested and subjected to quite an ordeal, actually, for something that turned out to be not a bigoted tweet at all. But he is a 71-year-old man that's been through that process, and it sends a warning shot over the bow, doesn't it? You don't speak out. Lucy Connolly, don't speak out about immigration, whether you agree with what she said or not. And I think most of us don't agree with what she said. But that, you know, she's been made an example of, so that people don't feel the right to speak out.
Yeah.
This guy in Kent, he was speaking out against anti-Semitism. Are we not allowed to use social media now to comment on the world we live in? It's one of the few public squares that we do get to comment.
Well, that was the whole point of it, wasn't it? The whole kind of, you know, when it all started and people, do you remember chat rooms and things like that? You know, when the internet first sort of came, oh, there's a chat room for those who like country and western music, there's a chat room for this and a chat room. You know, people would set up these forums as well. That was the other thing, wasn't it? It was forums, and it was meant to be a bit wild westy. It wasn't always pretty, but it meant that you could sort of just be honest and brutal. You weren't being broadcast. Ofcom weren't, you know, breathing down your neck, and that was the kind of beauty of it. And now we've sort of turned that, what should have been a rather amazing development of free speech and democracy, we've kind of put it in reverse gear.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big favourite in the Wild West of opinions as well. It's kind of what the battle of ideas is about. People should be able to come together and discuss things that matter to them in the world about them. And it's the opposite of what the technocrats like. You know, they like us to be able to only express certain opinions, and they think everything should be tied up in legal bows as well. You can't really decide what you think about an issue unless you're in the Wild West of ideas and get to talk about it. And it's part of being human. I mean, this is such a dehumanising, censorious agenda that our elites are engaged in at the moment. And thank goodness the public keeps fighting back.
Indeed. Yeah, because you never really bump into people who believe this stuff, you know, in real life. You know, when I talk to my neighbours or, you know, the bloke that's doing our plumbing at the moment, you know, no one believes this guff and nonsense. But here we are. Let's hope there is a little bit of a change, and the sentiment and the thoughts and people's opinions around all of this is beginning to tilt towards, you know, common sense. Let's hope so. Mo, always great to have you on. Thank you, Mo Lovett, who's a producer at the Battle of Ideas, with us on the programme.